Greetings, fellow antler enthusiasts. Tiki here.
And Jacob Wild, too.
And welcome to the Main Street Cinema, the show where we discuss the finer points in filmmaking. And, oh God, Jacob, what happened with this movie? What happened with this movie? I think you and I have very, very interesting takes on this movie because I think you and we actually like this movie, and I feel like this movie is like way more divisive than I was expecting it to be, especially walking out of the theater myself. So, Jacob, what we're doing here, we're just going to do a Beauty and the Beast first reactions podcast. That means we're not going to have any spoilers or really anything that's going to otherwise kind of like ruin the experience of the movie for people who haven't seen it yet. And once Blue Dragon 5 gets a chance to see it, then we will do a spoiler cast on the movie. I mean, granted, there's not really many like spoilers. It's spoiler alert. They don't change very much, but still, I think like the Blue Dragon 5 podcast is going to go into a lot more detail. We'll break it down character by character. Here, we're just going to give our first impressions and our pros and cons. That's it. It's going to be very simple, very, very meat and potatoes, if you will. So, all right, Jacob, you want to go first with your first impressions and thoughts coming out and whatnot?
Okay, going into I'm obviously, if you've watched some of my previous stuff on this channel, such as the debates and things like that, you've noticed I picked Beauty and the Beast, the original, obviously, for some of my questions because there are very few who can match the quality of this one. It's like so I was kind of interested to see how the remake would go, how this live action remake would go about it. Having heard of some of the actors before and having notoriety of the director, I was actually quite interested in seeing it. And let's just say it actually really kind of exceeded my expectations going in. I mean, like, in my honest opinion, I can't say it matches up to the original because very few things can. But it also stands on its own in its own regard. I mean, I think it's definitely a spectacle to be said. That's for sure.
Absolutely, yeah. We'll talk about the spectacle part when we get to pros for sure.
It's basically a filmed Broadway musical. Like if Broadway musical was given a large screen and a budget.
I have a better way to put that, Dragon. I think this movie, like, it represents Disney magic.
That's exactly what it was.
Okay, so Jacob, let me go into my brief thoughts. So going in, folks, I set my expectations for this about as low as I could possibly get them, not because I didn't want to like it, but because I didn't want to be disappointed by it. Like, I don't have as strong of an attachment to the original as some people do. I mean, don't get me wrong. It's a masterpiece. It ranks up there with the best of them. But, Jacob, if you know me, you'll know that my personal taste for Disney movies tends to go in, like, the more kind of, like, obscure hipster direction, like the Goofy movies, The Rescuers Down Under, The Emperor's New Grooves, that kind of stuff. Like, that really is what gravitates towards me and, like, what me as an adult likes to watch. So with that in mind, I totally respect the original Beauty and the Beast. It is a triumph and a masterpiece and whatnot and all that stuff. But I was open-minded for this, and I also went in with the expectation of like there's no way possible imaginable that this is going to live up to the original movie. I'm not expecting it to. I don't think anyone involved with this movie is expecting it to. I just want to see how it stands up in its own right. And like I said, I have heard some kind of mixed reviews on it going in. Like, I try my very best to not let reviews judge my opinion on it, like before I see it, especially for bigger, high-stakes movies like this, where my opinion actually matters, because it's a Disney movie, and I'm kind of a voice in the Disney fan community. Kind of. I don't know. But, so, Jacob, I actually, like, I need to see this movie again, granted, but going out of it, just my first impressions of it, and granted, that's what this is. This is a first impressions podcast. By the time we get to the full spoiler podcast with Blue Dragon 5, I'll have seen this movie a second time in theaters, and I might have a totally different opinion about it. But folks, get ready for a totally contrarian opinion to to a lot of my friends on Facebook and just people in general I've talked to who have seen this movie, I kind of love this movie. I really do. I feel like this movie, it certainly isn't the original movie. Like I said, I didn't expect it to be. It's not trying to be. I actually think the parts that are the weakest in this movie, Jacob, are the parts where it's kind of just like the Gus Van Sant Psycho thing, where they're just literally doing a shot by shot. And that kind of stuff is like, I will admit that kind of stuff is a little too present in this movie for me. But the stuff that they add to this movie, especially in regards to fleshing out the supporting cast, really, like, it's certainly not as well, it's certainly not as much of a masterpiece as the original by any stretch, but it really gave this movie its own tone, its own style, and I don't know, I just think that people in the larger scale fan community are kind of going about this the wrong way if they're expecting it to be exactly like the original.
I have to tend to agree. Like, I have to agree with your entire statement. I did love this movie, and almost everybody in my theater did. I gave it a round of applause.
You know what? It's funny you mentioned that. Yeah, because when I was in the theater, people were eating it up. I mean, like, even the stuff that was like a major controversy going into it, like, oh, LeFou's gay, it's like, I mean,
yeah, it's like,
I don't want to get into that too much.
That wasn't really even played up that much in the actual movie.
But when it was played up, Jacob, and when the audience did get it, they responded to it, and they responded super positively.
It got laughs.
Exactly. It wasn't just like, yeah, LGBT rights. It was more like, this is genuinely funny stuff.
it was more like, it's not like, hey, he's funny because he's acting like that. No, he's just like, what he's saying is actually funny. If you get what I'm saying there, it's like, it's not funny because of what he is. It's because of funny of what he's saying.
I mean, like, let's face it. Josh Gad is look, he's been in some bad movies. After he struck big in Frozen, I will admit he's been in some bad movies. But he's still, yeah, but still, he's a comedic genius, man. I mean, anyone who's a fan of the Book of Mormon knows that.
Josh Gad, I mean, like, he's definitely he's perfect as LeFou.
Oh, absolutely. And as soon as he was cast as LeFou, I knew he'd be perfect as LeFou.
oh yeah. I mean, like, and it's scenes where he's like, and you're so athletically inclined.
yeah. That's the kind of stuff, Jacob, where I feel like that stuff, like, it's stuff that the audience can get, and it's stuff that especially the adults can get, but it doesn't take away from his character. If anything, I just think it adds to his character, especially once towards the end of the movie. Well, let's not get into spoilers, because he does actually have an arc in this movie that's kind of set apart from the original, and I don't want to get into that because it could be a spoiler, but you know what I mean? He does, like, it is like, thanks to that character trait of his, I feel like it does give him more depth of the character, and also more opportunities for comedy, and not just like, haha, isn't it funny that he's gay? More like, haha, isn't it funny that, like, Gaston is like this super manly man obsessed with getting Belle, and he's just totally oblivious to LeFou. That's where the comedy comes from, is, the fact that Gaston's oblivious to it. You know what I mean?
like perfect example, which really doesn't spoil much. It's kind of been, like, this doesn't spoil much, like, where Gaston's like talking about himself in a mirror. And he's like, I'm not done with you. I'm not done with you yet. Then LeFou's like,
that's the kind of thing I'm talking about, where the audience I was with, at least, I mean, granted, I'm in, like, the super liberal Bay Area, California, so, but the audience I saw it with absolutely ate all those moments up. They loved it. So, okay, so Jacob, let's get into the pros and cons of this, because granted, there are some pros and there are some cons, so, but let's start with the pro of, like, this is just, like, this might be
Alan Menken strikes gold again.
I wouldn't necessarily say gold. I'll say, I'll give it fair. Like, I'll say it's like some silver medal award worthy songs, especially Evermore. I'm a fan of Evermore, but
that's what I'm. And I did like some of the changes they made to the songs too. I mean,
I will say that all 4 of the new songs in this movie are, like, much better than Human again.
I said Evermore definitely is like this, like the one this movie was like made for. Like this, like this is the show stealer. This is Oscar bait.
Yeah,
This is
Evermore
their
is a
Oscar bait.
highlight for sure. I
It's
don't
their
want to get
Oscar.
into spoilers for it, but I love the way it's staged. Okay.
I said, I'm not denying that, but I mean, it's good Oscar bait. It's like Oscar bait in the best sense of the word.
Yeah, totally. Okay, so just a big pro for me, Jacob, is this very well might be the most beautiful looking live action Disney movie ever.
It's like the scene that caught me by surprise is what they did with Be Our Guest.
Be Our Guest is very
like,
intimate in this movie, but I feel like it's in a good way.
Now, don't get me wrong; it's still a spectacle, but like, and don't the rest of the scene is shot. The rest of the movie is shot like this too. I mean, it's shot gorgeously. But I mean, the visuals, the movement, with the way the feather dusters were dancing with the plates, like
the great thing about Be Our Guest is that it all felt very practical. You know what I mean?
Like I said, it just looks like it fit in with the rest of the world.
Yeah, right. I want to mention that in general.
I mean,
go ahead.
What I like about it is like the fact that it's like even with its legacy, and even if you go in and the fact that it's a musical, you allow it suspends your disbelief almost immediately. That even if like the slightest thing doesn't even look realistic, you don't mind because
that's the Disney magic I'm talking about with that movie. That's the Disney magic I'm talking about. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
It captures you. I mean, like, well, I can't speak for everyone. I'm speaking for myself.
No, because this movie clearly has a lot of detractors online. It's a very Dragon. This might be this year's Batman versus Superman, dare I say? Which we're on. Which it feels weird being on like the opposite side of that argument.
Yeah, seriously. But like I said, this is my personal opinion. Like I said, it allows for greater suspension of disbelief than a lot of other movies, which in a way is a good thing, which allows you like to buy the whole enchanted castle aspect, even like which is admittedly harder to pull off in live action than it is in animation.
It is harder, but I feel like when they do pull it off, it's like I think the design of the castle is incredible. It's one of the best sets I've ever seen in any movie ever. Just hands down, like, and just how it all flows together, like the exteriors, the interiors, like you. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
And I was like how like I probably shouldn't say that because it's probably a bit of a spoiler. So you go ahead.
Okay. Yeah. So, Jacob, I want to talk about the objects because I feel like the objects are one of the more divisive things in this movie that to me worked absolutely. Like the objects in this movie were the Disney magic I was talking about. It was absolute, like, I hated the design of the objects basically all the way through all of the marketing. I'll say that much.
The design of who? You cut out. I didn't hear that part.
The objects, like Cogsworth, Lumiere, Mrs. Potts, Chip.
All
the enchanted objects. I hated their designs, Jacob. I hated their designs because I felt they were too realistic and they just didn't have the characteristics of the original. Jacob, one of the things I love about this movie that I don't feel like is getting any credit at all, or hardly any credit, is the fact that through the objects being as realistic as they are, it manages to suspend your disbelief so much. You know what I mean? Like Lumiere actually being a candlestick, Cogsworth actually being a clock. It's like they're not anthropomorphized, which I really like. I really like the lack of anthropomorphism.
Well, the other, but like it's like in a way contrasting the original, where it's like they still have, like human-like qualities, and like this actually like shows a present danger to them being what they are.
Which, Jacob, if for anyone who's watched my Disney debates about Old Man Beast, I will say there is some stuff about Lumiere in there that's kind of like alarmingly similar to what I had pitched, which was totally unintentional.
Like, so that kind of surprised me. It's like it actually shows them in danger.
Did that run through your head at all? Like when you were watching the movie, did you think about my Old Man Beast pitch?
Not really, but now that you mention it, kind of is. But like I said, what I like is that it actually raises the stakes for everybody instead of just the beasts.
And that's one of the things I love about this movie. Also, is that I truly feel like the enchanted objects work better as like comic relief in the original movie. Like, they are prime comic relief, all of them. And Mrs. Potts works. I will say Mrs. Potts is like the one exception I think I have in that I don't necessarily like Emma Thompson's performance. I don't necessarily and Chip as well. I feel like Lumiere and Cogsworth really worked very well as Plumette, as well as characters like the like Stanley Tucci as the as the piano, as the harpsichord, and the wardrobe.
I know you'd like Stanley Tucci.
Mm-hmm. And the wardrobe, of course, the classic, the classic footstool dog. All those objects, I think, work really well. The only objects that I don't feel work very well are Chip and Mrs. Potts. Those are like the two exceptions for me.
I can see where you're coming from there.
I will say that probably the worst executed song in this whole movie is the most important one. It's the title song. Because
Beauty and the Beast?
Yeah, because I don't want to get into very many specifics about the way it's shot or anything like that. But let me just say, it's just, this maybe isn't fair to Emma Thompson. I mean, poor Emma Thompson. But it doesn't hold a candle to Angela Lansbury. I mean, it just, it's not even in the same ballpark as Angela Lansbury. I mean, people get all up in freaking oh god, what's her name? Emma Watson. I was like, different Emma. People get all up in Emma Watson's grill over her singing, but you know what? Emma Thompson, I don't think is any better. I think Emma Thompson has to deliver the song of the movie. So, and let's talk about Emma Watson, okay? I don't think she's that bad. I mean, I don't think she's like the most dynamic actress ever or the best singer ever, but I really don't get all this like hate for her. What do you think about that, Jacob?
I mean, I thought she did. I thought she worked pretty well for the role, honestly.
Yeah, I did too. I mean, I'm not like over the moon about her performance, but I certainly don't think it's like Russell Crowe and Les Mis bad or anything like that. And again, it's one of those things, like, I guess I'm being too harsh on Emma Thompson because like Beauty and the Beast is the iconic number, and like with Emma Watson, it's a similar thing where it's impossible to top Paige O'Hara. You know what I mean? It's like Paige O'Hara is just like one of the voices of the modern generation when it comes to musicals. So it's just like, I don't know. There were some inflection problems on Emma Watson's end. I felt like she was kind of struggling with her accent as well. But I don't really like. It doesn't drag the movie down for me in any way. It doesn't drag her character down. The fact that she's not a perfect singer. If anything, the fact that she's not a perfect singer kind of adds to her quirkiness in a way. It's like we just went all gaga over La La Land because of that. You know what I mean? It's like the same concept as La La Land. In La La Land, they're not singing and dancing perfectly. So I don't know.
True. So I do agree. I mean, like I said, I thought she worked well with the character. I mean, I don't know what else I can say. I thought she was pretty good. I thought she was good in the role.
Mm-hmm. I don't want to say too much about. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Oh, I'm sorry. I don't want to say.
Go ahead. I wasn't saying.
Okay. I don't want to say too much about Dan Stevens as the Beast, but I will say he was probably the biggest surprise for me. Because again, I really don't like the design, and I don't think the design holds up in motion as well as, like, let's say something like Lumiere or Cogsworth, where to me it was amazing just how well Lumiere and Cogsworth and Plumette looked fully animated and fully realized. I was really swept up in it. Having said that, I do think there are some real highlights to the Beast. I think the Beast's facial reactions are very good. I mean, look, you're not going to compare them to the original because, I mean, of course, the original is like the hallmark of, Disney facial expressions. I mean, it's just, you're not going to get that level. But
you can't replicate that big smile.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying. Right. I do think they get into the humanity of the Beast a lot more, which might be to the detriment of the character a little bit. Like, I will say the Beast is one of the things that's just, like, he's good, he's effective, he might be a little lukewarm compared to the original.
Right, yeah. They did
He's
change
just
his
not as
character.
animalistic. He's just not as animalistic as he was in the original.
They did like that. They like tried to. They didn't like completely change his character. Though, like they made him more sympathetic and less sympathetic in different ways.
No, you're right. You're right, and I think I think I will have to take a second viewing for that.
I mean, like they definitely like showed like his more educated, well-rounded side, which actually helped the connection to Belle actually seem a bit more believable.
You know what? You're right about that. Because in the original, it's basically just like, oh, he gave me a library. But no, in this, it's like they're bonding over the books. You know what I mean? They have common interests. I actually do think that worked really well. I mean, look, I'm sorry for anyone who might be watching and who didn't like this movie and who thought this movie was painful to sit through. Like, I know this movie had some distractors, but to me, I was pretty much fully entranced by it the whole way through.
I mean, I have to totally agree. I mean, like, and they definitely amped up the comedy for it too. I mean, like, they definitely added a lot more comedy in this one than was in the original.
Well, I didn't necessarily see it that way.
I mean, they did. I mean, I know it's a lot more laughs coming from people than from the original.
I mean, but I mean, I assume you didn't have the experience of watching the original in theaters. Neither did I, so you don't know how many laughs were coming in the original.
I mean, me personally, I thought it was funnier. Like, had a lot more comedic scenes to it.
I mean, I see where you're coming from. I also think it was darker in certain areas too.
Yeah, maybe.
Okay, can we talk about the man himself, though? Can we talk about Gaston?
No. Yep. Yes.
Okay. I think Luke Evans does a fantastic job as Gaston. I think he's just like the physical embodiment of the character. I kind of feel like he's just a smidge underwritten in this movie, though.
Yeah, and he doesn't have the deep voice, though.
I mean, that's true. That's true. But I think he makes up for not having the deep voice by, like I said, just the physicality. And I think out of all the characters in this movie, he and LeFou are like by far the most resembling of the originals, like just in terms of the way they look.
They had the whole war subplot and everything,
which I think is fantastic for Gaston. And I also love that gives the people of the town a much more sympathetic reason to root for Gaston and to love Gaston than just like, oh, he's the hot guy, he's the strong hero. I actually thought that war stuff was like, what?
More than like he's the strong hunter guy.
Exactly. I don't want to get too much into the war stuff because, again, it's definitely a new addition for the movie. But I will agree with you. I thought that worked really well, especially like we're saying about adding like having it make sense that this douche nugget of a character could be so well respected by the town. And then finally, rounding out the cast is Kevin Kline, who does fantastic work as well.
It's like, it's snow in June.
So basically what we're getting at with this long-winded tangent is I think for the most part, besides maybe the exception of Emma Thompson and the kid who plays Chip, the main cast is fantastic. Ewan McGregor and Ian McKellen work so well off of each other. I'm surprised people aren't giving Ian McKellen more props for Cogsworth, because I thought he had a really interesting take on that character where it wasn't as like, it was uppity, but it wasn't as like cliche butler as the original one was. It was more just kind of like, it's a much more world-weary Cogsworth. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's like, turn back to a clock, turn back to a clock.
I love Ian McKellen. I just... Long live Ian McKellen, man. Seriously.
I was actually going to tell him off this time. like, oh, master.
And I actually think the relationship between Lumiere and Plumette is really believable in this movie, much more so than the original movie.
It's like in the original, like Lumiere just seemed like a guy's like, oh yeah, you're caught, I'm gonna chase you.
Exactly. Yeah, totally. Exactly. Wherein in this movie, you really feel the connection between them throughout the whole damn movie. You feel the connection between them.
It's like he actually cares for it. Like they had a thing for each other before they were turned into objects. It seems.
All right,
Whereas it's only briefly hinted at in the original movie.
I'm getting heated about this, man. I'm getting heated about this because I know how much people don't like this movie in some circles. It just works so well for me. I mean, like I said, Jacob, there is a possibility that I'm going to go into my second viewing of this movie and just like all the criticisms that people have lobbed against it, like I'll just be like, oh, Emma, oh, honey, oh, no, oh no, oh, you're watching it, Emma.
I'm gonna see it again soon, so I might be in the same boat.
Oh, I think that'll be interesting. Yeah, us having a second opinion on it when we talk about it again.
Yeah, no, I mean, don't get me wrong. I loved it the first time, and so did, like I said, I got applause when I saw it on Saturday, and like I almost like near the end, I almost cried. Believe it or not.
Yeah, yeah. So I think just in general, the pros are, the pros are. Go ahead.
I mean, I knew exactly what was going to happen, but I was like, no.
Well, I mean, to be fair, like, look, we all know that there's going to be the scene where this isn't a spoiler to say that there's a scene where Gaston looks like he kills the beast, right? But Jacob, would you agree that that scene is like shockingly violent in this version?
Yeah, I did. I mean, like, because in the original, let's just say the way they do it in here is a lot more graphic.
Oh man, I was like,
not necessarily. Actually, scratch it. It actually is more graphic than the original.
I mean, I would definitely say I'm surprised that didn't earn this movie a PG-13 just for that.
PG-13?
Yeah, I'm glad it didn't get a PG-13, but like I don't know, like I don't want to give away exactly what it is and like how it's shot and everything, but I would say that was definitely a shocking moment. And like I said, it's it's certainly something that happens in the original as well, so it's not giving anything away. But
yeah, like I said, like it's definitely a lot less graphic, and it only happens once in the original movie. This time it actually happens 3 times.
Right.
I mean,
okay. So let's just reiterate our. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I mean, seriously. I was like, oh my god. I mean, like seriously. I mean, that's one thing I wasn't expecting them to change.
No, me neither. Jacob, other people have mentioned this. I feel like this is just kind of like a common fact, and this is going to be like my transition into cons, because I don't have many cons for this, honestly, but I really, really wish they would have included the whole, like, every last inch of me's covered in hair line.
Every last what?
In the Gaston song, like, they cut out the every last inch of me is covered in hair.
I do.
Like, I feel like that is like the biggest missed opportunity of this whole movie is not having that moment in there. Like, why did they feel the need to cut that out? Is it just because they didn't feel like putting like fake chest hair on Luke Evans? I don't know.
And every last inch of me's covered with hair. I could actually do a pretty good Gaston impression.
Okay, just to reiterate the pros here, people, because there's a lot of them. I think the cast, for the most part, is fantastic. The music obviously works really well. I think that, like I said, the new songs at their worst are better than Human Again, and at their best, like Evermore, I think definitely like fit into the slate of the older songs. I think the musical numbers in general are fantastic, work really well. They're more practical than they were in the original movie.
I'm sorry. Speaking of Evermore, they actually gave the Beast his own song in this movie. He never had one in the original. He only just sang briefly in the original version of Something There.
Right. The production design is obviously fantastic.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
And that's about all I have for pros, unless you have anything else for pros, just in general.
No, I mean, like, the movie's gorgeous.
Pure Disney magic with some of the effects.
It should at least get nominated for Oscars. I mean, that's the.
Oh, I definitely think this movie will get nominated for, like, at the very least. I mean, I don't think it'll be nominated for, like, Best Picture or anything with acting or anything like that. But I definitely think this movie is a contender for production design.
I mean, costume design, definitely.
Costume design, for sure. Visual effects, all that good stuff.
The original one was the first animated film to be nominated for Best Picture, but I don't think that this one will repeat that.
I really don't think so, and I don't think it's expecting to either. But at the very least, like I said, we respect this movie a hell of a lot more than most of the Disney fan community at large does. I think. I don't know, Jacob. We're always contrarians here on So You Want to Be an Imagineer. Okay, so can you find any cons in this movie? I guess with me, like I said, Emma Thompson just doesn't work. I don't like her Cockney accent, and that goes with the kid playing Chip as well. I just think it's weird to have like such overly British accents in something that's supposed to be French.
Well, that's how it usually is. Like in English-speaking movies that take place in France, they usually do British. For some
I know.
reason.
I just think, I don't understand. Like, why go the Cockney route with it though?
I don't know. Maybe because they already had other actors that are British. I don't know.
I guess.
Because technically they have Ian McKellen, who's already naturally British.
That's true.
And technically Emma Thompson is also naturally British.
Yeah, but I feel like Emma Thompson, like she exaggerated that accent though.
She hammed it up a little bit. I know.
Yeah. Oh yeah, she definitely hammed it up. Let me see. In terms of cons, like I said, Jacob, there's, you know what, I can point out. I can kind of pinpoint one moment. I could kind of pinpoint one moment in the movie that just like I was just like, why are we seeing this? This is literally like shot by shot the original. And it's the moment where, like, right after Beast saves Belle from the wolves, and then Belle saves Beast. You know, like Belle takes Beast back to the castle, which is a really well done scene. But right after we get the scene where Belle is kind of like tending to Beast's wounds in the bed, and I'm just like, motherfucker, this is literally shot by shot. This is like shot by shot, line for line, exactly how it was in the original. And there's moments like that that really do take me out of the movie, Jacob. It really does. When the movie stays that faithful to the original, it does kind of like take me out, and I'm like, okay, I just feel like I'm watching a not as good adaptation of the original in scenes like that. I kind of feel like some of the scenes in the village are kind of like that as well. Like some of the early interactions between Belle and Gaston are very much shot by shot like the original. And like I said, like the movie is. Go ahead.
A pro for that, though. A pro for the whole Gaston scene. I'm kind of glad they cut out the whole like outdoor marriage thing at first.
Oh God, that was ridiculous.
Because even in the original, that was a bit contrived, even for Gaston.
It was. But you know what I mean? Like I like when they change the visuals. Like, okay, for example, in the song Belle, one of my favorite moments in this whole movie is a visual change that they do. You know that bridge in the song, that great bridge, like the whole like, oh, isn't this amazing? You know?
Yeah.
And in the original, she's like just singing to a bunch of sheep. She's like reciting the book to a bunch of sheep because she's a Disney princess and she interacts with animals. But in this, it's just like Emma Watson just like wistfully singing to herself and just like caught up in her own world, and it's like a close-up of her. And I don't know, Jacob, that works for me.
If it fits with the lyrics, her head's stuck in a book.
Yeah, and that was one of the moments early on in the movie where I was just like, this is really doing it for me. This is really doing it for me.
And speaking of the opening number, like, can we see like how they amped it up to like 11 in this? Like,
oh my God, yes, it's quite fantastic.
they amped all the original musical numbers up to 11 for the visuals in terms of visual, but like in terms of staging of this original one, like they actually made it seem like a small village was actually singing this instead of just like these. Like the original one did a good job, don't get me wrong, but this one actually made it seem like this entire village thinks she's nuts.
Yeah, that was really well done.
Yeah.
I will say, like I said, the one musical number that I feel was like kind of scaled back and toned down, but for the better, like it worked in the context and the style of this movie, was Be Our Guest. Because Be Our Guest is still a spectacle, but I feel like we said, it like that movie, that scene just sticks in my mind because it's just like it was done so practically. Go ahead.
And what they did in the original, they put like with all the dancing pots and like like that scene where like with your meal with your ease, in the original, like where all the dancing, like all the pots and plates are bouncing on top of each other. That would obviously be very hard to recreate in CGI.
Yeah, so what they do instead is they're just
I mean, sure, they probably could do it in a way, but it wouldn't look as convincing as it did in 2D. So I'm kind of
much like Lumiere, wouldn't be as convincing if they just went with the original design of Lumiere, where his face is the candle.
Like instead of having like the face on the candle.
Yeah, right. No, like I said, Be Our Guest just really stands out to me because obviously it's a showstopper in the context of the movie. It's probably the second most famous song in that whole movie besides Beauty and the Beast itself. Maybe Belle is a second. But it's just like, it's so cool the way that it looks so practical, and it legitimately just looks like a bunch of like plates and forks and stuff just dancing around. You know what I mean? It's scaled back, but in a really cool way. So, okay. I mean, I really don't have a ton of cons here.
Like I said, from cons like straight into positives again.
I know, right? Exactly. I think, like I said, like with Gaston, I feel like there could have been a little bit more menace there.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, I kind of do have to agree. I mean, like he didn't have like his mannerisms definitely made up for it, and don't get me wrong, Luke. I mean, this isn't anything on Luke Evans, but his voice just didn't have the natural menace that the original that Richard White's did.
And I mean, don't get me wrong. By the third act, he's certainly like a dick. You know, by the third act.
Don't get me wrong. I mean, and like I said, I like how they actually made him like actually somewhat try to be nicer in this movie. Like like he's at least trying to be nice.
Instead of like, it's kind of like a happy medium between like the Legend of Sleepy Hollow Brom Bones and the original Gaston.
Yeah, he's at least like he at least tries to like acknowledge what Maurice is saying and actually try to help him to just like he's like, maybe if I earn favor, I'd be able to get favor with Belle too.
Sure.
Like instead of just like like immediately throwing him out, then immediately thinking like, oh, I can prosecute him and win Belle that way. But no, like he tries to help Maurice and then decides to prosecute him.
Okay,
which I think.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
No, one of the cons I will point out is that I don't necessarily think this movie needed to be over 2 hours long. It's like what, like 2 hours and 15, 20 minutes?
I didn't see how long it was, but I'll take your word for it. I mean, it flew by fast, but
it did fly by fast, but I just feel like with a story that's this simple, you don't necessarily like need all that padding there. And some of the padding's good, but I don't know. Go ahead.
I think the gift from the Enchantress that took her to Paris, that took them to Paris, that kind of came out of nowhere, admittedly.
That's my least favorite scene in the film by far.
Like I said, it didn't really make a lot of sense. It was never brought up again. It's like they can just get out at any time if they wanted to.
Exactly. Oh God, I wish that wasn't in the movie. Okay, thank you. I'm glad you brought that up.
I mean, he said it was a cruel prank, but it doesn't really make any sense. Why would she even do that?
It's stupid. That thing is stupid. Okay, folks, you want negativity? There you go.
Basically,
there you go.
Basically, it was only an excuse so she could learn what happened to her mother.
Yep. Which we won't spoil what happens to her mother, but it is kind of a cool reveal. I mean, it's not a cool reveal; it's a very sad reveal, but we won't spoil what it is.
Admittedly, it is kind of sad, though.
But no, you're absolutely right. I will agree that was by far the worst scene in the movie. Easily the worst scene in the movie by far.
No, really contrived.
Although
admittedly, I do like Beastline before that. Look for it in your mind's eye and find it in your heart.
That's a damn good line.
I did like that.
Yeah, but it doesn't excuse
it's definitely played up like the whole. He's actually kind of refined and not just shows there's more dimension to it. He's an eloquent speaker in this movie.
Right.
But then that scene happened. It's like it doesn't make a lot of sense in the overall
context. It really doesn't.
I mean, in another movie it'd be like a great scene, like it'd be actually a great plot device in another kind of movie.
I mean, if they actually did something with said plot device instead of just like dropped it like a lead brick.
Yeah, at first I was like, it would have been fine if it wasn't like if they weren't physically there. Like it's like she could just see what happened and just like not be physically there.
Exactly.
I mean, if it was just like a vision, that would have made it a lot more made a bit
Or
more.
even if they just worked it into the magic mirror, which frankly I think they should have done.
Yeah, like I said, they kind of just come off as contrived and forced. And honestly, I mean, like, sorry, that is a bit of a spoiler alert, but
It is a little bit,
it is
yeah.
but like that's pretty much one of the few
But
scenes
we're
they actually
stretching
did.
for negatives here, people. We're stretching for negatives.
Like I said, that's one of the few scenes that's actually like one of the few scenes they actually did add to the movie.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, and it doesn't really change that much overall.
Sure, sure.
But like
Okay.
I said, if it was like a vision thing, and she's like, I know what happened to Mother, but that would like changed everything. But that
Yeah.
would like, but that's just, I mean, I said, don't get me wrong. Like I said, the whole concept is great, and like an entire movie could be based around that one scene alone.
It just
I mean, in
doesn't
my
fit with
opinion,
everything else in this movie, and it kind of leads to some. I'll admit that scene does lead to some like gaps in logic and some pretty big crater-sized plot holes.
but it makes up for it. Admittedly, I mean,
But I mean, then again, Jacob,
I mean,
when you think about it, the original movie had gigantic crater-sized plot holes as well. So, that's really nothing new for Beauty and the Beast.
no, but like I said, it's the overall experience and good storytelling
Exactly.
of the movie that makes it what it is,
Exactly.
in my opinion. I mean, the plot holes like it doesn't really derail the movie or anything, so I think so it doesn't really ruin it for me.
Yeah, I'll agree. It's just kind of like in the moment, it's just like, this is weird.
I said that I will admit that one small scene with the book was a bit contrived, though a cool concept, and could actually, like I said, they could actually turn that into a whole movie by itself, and could have like been like, oh, this is awesome, like a book that can take you anywhere just by thinking about it. That's awesome.
It's kind of like the Page Master in a way.
Page Master, but good. But
hey, I love the Page Master.
I know.
I mean, don't get me wrong. That movie's utter shit. But it's 90s cheese at its finest, man. Oh my god. Whoopi Goldberg is fantasy.
Hey, you want to grow up with a good book.
Oh god.
Okay, but
no, seriously, The Page Master is like a great example of like a shitty movie with an incredible concept.
But yeah, admittedly, the idea of that library, of that book, is a good idea. Like I said, they could turn that into an idea of its own, but it had to be saddled to this, and to sadly settle to this.
I got you.
But like I said, but as I'll read it, the prose like, look forward in your mind's eye and feel it with your heart. Like I said, that's a beautiful line. I mean, it was so beautiful they used it in the trailers.
Which is really effective in the trailers as well. Yeah. Okay, I want to kind of go away from the book because I feel like we're kind of just repeating the same points. But
yeah.
Anyways, any other cons you can think of, or should we get into final thoughts?
I can't really think of any other cons. I mean, they're not. I mean, I can't really personally think of a lot right now. I mean,
yeah, not me neither. I mean, maybe I will when I see the movie again.
I mean, admittedly, the makeup in the party in the beginning was kind of weird.
Okay, yes. Okay, I'm glad you mentioned that. I'm so glad you mentioned that. yeah. So the prince who turns into the Beast has like this weird, like blue makeup, and it's like gaudy as hell, and.
I mean, the makeup.
That was totally silly.
I mean, the rest of it. I mean, the rest of it's completely fine. But the makeup was like, okay, it's like, I mean, what kind of party is this?
it honest to God, it felt like something out of oh shit.
It was almost like, did Stanley Kubrick make this?
Yeah. I was about to say, what's that? I'm sorry, I'm drawing a blank. What's the
It's like something. It's almost like Clockwork Orange or Eyes Wide Shut or something like that.
Eyes Wide Shut is the movie I'm thinking of. It's like the secret society from Eyes Wide Shut. I'm just like, what is going on here? What? Okay, so folks, there you go. There are some silly as fuck moments in this. There's the prince's makeup at the beginning, which is just like a totally just like, it just makes me laugh. thinking about it. In all honesty, it's just like, what are you doing?
I mean, don't get me wrong. The rest
Like,
of
I
the
mean,
part, the rest
I
of the
get the
party.
symbolism, right? Like, I get the symbolism of it, but it's just so silly.
I mean, like I said, it would work fine if he just didn't have the makeup on his eyes. I mean,
Oh man.
it just doesn't make a lot of sense. I mean, like we get it. He's throwing a party. It's supposed to be like so, like supposed to be like, oh, he's like throwing this extravagant party just for the heck of it. You know, yada yada yada.
So, okay, so I think with that, Jacob, let's get into final thoughts. Why don't you go first?
I said, I think we pretty much said all we can. This movie,
Yeah.
I thoroughly enjoyed this movie. I mean, I know it's not the best. I know it's not the best movie, and it's not not as good as the original, but it kind of moved me. Darn it! I mean, like with what they mean, they some good changes. I mean, like they addressed some few things that changed. That addressed a few things that even called forth the original fairy tale in ways the original one didn't.
Yeah, you're right. You're right about that for sure.
Positive when Linda Wolverton did not write this version.
Sure.
I just even though she did write the original, which she did write the original, so we do have to thank her for that. So, admittedly, but but I was thoroughly impressed by the movie, and as we've said before, we might have differing opinions if we see it again.
Of course,
if we see it again, but at least for the first time, I made quite the impression.
Yeah, Jacob, you pretty much said everything that I need to say too. This movie is Disney magic for me, man. It really is. I mean, maybe I'm just like, I'm past my mid-20s at this point. I am in my late 20s, so for my relative old age compared to a lot of the audience that's watching this channel, I might just be getting soft. But no, it's like this movie really worked for me. It really did.
To quote what one person said about the original, it's like all the best people in the industry come together because pretty much everybody needs the same kind of entertainment here. Like everybody, like the best talents coming together, put together a fine product. I said,
and you know what, Jacob? I'm going to say something that's like probably pretty controversial, and people like are not going to like it all. I do think this is a better movie than The Jungle Book.
I mean, The Jungle Book was definitely a visual spectacle. I mean,
But that's all it was to me, though. It was visual spectacle, and it was great visual spectacle. And it did have some really cool storytelling elements. I mean, Shere Khan worked really well. But there were elements of the Jungle Book that kind of didn't work as well for me as I hoped they would. Baloo being one of them.
I mean, I do see what you mean.
Whereas this, I just feel like the Jungle Book was a good experiment and a good first step towards something like this.
It perfectly captures like what Cinderella managed to do as well.
Oh, I think this is a far better movie than Cinderella, though. I mean, don't get me wrong. I think Cinderella's good. It's a good movie, but I think this is this captured me a lot more than Cinderella did.
Yeah, this one definitely got to me a lot more than it did. I mean, like,
and that might just be because I think Beauty and the Beast, obviously, like the story and the source material is like a far better movie in general than the original Cinderella. But
like I said, this one actually got to me a bit more personal and intimate in a way.
Sure. But yeah, I mean, God, I don't know. Like, do I want to see everything remade like this? No, not really. But if they keep making movies that are this good and that are at least have this good of a production value behind it, because even the people that don't like this movie admit that it looks beautiful. It's like, I don't know, Jacob. It's like I'm curious about it. Like,
it just shows that like Disney isn't. I mean, they're remaking their movies just to get money, of course. But like, it's actually showing that they're actually getting people
money.
Yes, the money. Excellent. But it shows that they're getting people who actually care to actually make a good movie and not just it's like make it more than just a cash grab. I mean, admittedly, like I'll openly admit, and they're probably openly admit, it's a complete and total cash grab.
Right.
But it's a damn good cash grab, in my personal opinion, obviously.
All right, and Jacob, I think that's a good place to end it then.
but like I said, it's a good cash grab. Like it shows that they're willing to give people who actually care to at least try. I mean, if say what you will about the movie, at least they say they tried to make it good. They tried to do good. I mean, and that even the biggest detractor movie can say they at least tried to put together a good movie, and that's the most that can be said.
All right. Okay, so obviously, folks, I truly do feel like Jacob and I are in the minority when it comes to this movie. I like the most I've seen is probably like mixed reviews of this movie that are not as positive as we are, and then I've definitely seen a lot of just outwardly negative reviews of this movie as well. Obviously, we've been glowing about this movie, so we don't really feel that way.
I mean, it's very divisive. Like you said, we've seen some detractors. We've seen some like people who like think like people saying it's almost perfect.
Exactly. So, like I said, it might be this year's Batman versus Superman, or at least Man of Steel.
So. Admittedly, it is a lot of people probably will agree it's better than Batman versus Superman.
Oh God, yes. Oh my God, please. Like, people who I know dislike this movie, please tell me you like it better than Batman versus fucking Superman. Please. Okay. And with that, Jacob.
Like I said, and let me just say, I also might be speaking from a personal bias here about because I hold the original one in high regard.
Well, sure, but I mean, if this movie would have messed it up, you would have been all the more critical for it, though.
Yeah, true, but like I said, but when it got good, that might be creating a personal bias.
That's true.
So
that's true.
If it was bad, it'd be more critical. If it was good, bias. So forgive me. So when I say might admittedly be biased, but I can't really tell. But that's just how I honestly feel about it. So.
Okay, folks, so thank you for joining us for our very contrarian opinions about Beauty and the Beast. Blue Dragon 5 he's kind of he doesn't know exactly when he's going to get a chance to see this one. It could be at the soonest, it could be as soon as next week. At the latest, it could be as late as like the last week of April. So it's going to be basically like any time within the next month or so. But regardless, in that time frame, we will be back. Jacob and I will have seen this movie a second time. Dragon probably will have seen it for a first time, and we will do a full-blown spoiler cast on the movie, breaking down everything character by character, getting to the nitty-gritty, getting Dragon's opinions on it. Of course, talking more in depth about what they changed and what they didn't change and all that good stuff. But in the meantime, folks, I don't know. Try the gray stuff, Jacob. Try the gray stuff.
One ends like Gaston. Next ends like Gaston.
And I end all my podcasts so awkwardly.